Oh boy, that is a big old group right there. We'll drop that one in there. It's super windy today, so it might take a half second to get down. We'll just work it right along the tops of there. My guess is it's not gonna take long to get bit. There we go. Well, welcome back. As you can see, we're not out chasing walleyes today. We're doing something a little bit different. We are targeting some nice, some nice fall crappies. Such a fun time of year. You can see that one on the new crappie queen jig. And so today we're gonna give you a little bit of a blueprint to some of these fall crappies. Ooh, that guy was in there good. There, we got her. Show it off one more time. And so like I said, we're gonna kind of give you a little bit of a blueprint to fall crappies. Right now, I would say we are in an early fall crappie phase. I honestly anticipate it to be a little bit further along, but it's been such a warm fall so far. Definitely seeing more early patterns, which actually works out good because it kind of helped me talk through the early stages, what these fish are gonna do throughout the fall, even until ice up. So I'm gonna talk through first, even how to pick the right lakes. Then I'm gonna talk through just different locations depending on the time of year. Then I'll talk through some different presentation things, then give you a bunch of other tips and tricks just to help you be a little bit more efficient and effective when targeting these fall crappies. And so there's too many fish down there. I need to catch one more, and then we'll go into how to find the right lakes. Yeah, you can see that whole slew of them. I'm actually gonna go try to get out a little further. Some of those looked a touch bigger, so I'm gonna try to get out a little further in front without spooking them. Let's see, now I'm to that second group. It's probably pretty hard to see, but there we go. You can see it way out there. These ones looked a touch bigger. However, anytime the fish are farther away, they always look bigger, but still worth a cast. You can see it is very windy today, and I was able to rip that thing pretty far out there, and that's because I am using an 1/8 ounce tungsten jig. Like I said, this is that new crappie queen jig. I'll show that one off here quick. There we go. Another decent fish. If we want to do a little fish fry tonight, we'd be sitting good. But like I said, very windy day, so I'm upsizing a little bit. But I'll talk through that after a bit because I'm going to start with even how to pick the right lakes. And so the nice thing about today's day and age is we have information at our fingertips, so much of it. And whether you're using the Minnesota DNR Lake Finder on the web and being able to kind of sort through lakes there, or you're using the Onyx app, which tends to be a little more efficient, but you have to pay for it. So obviously, depending on what you're looking for, you're gonna select different things on the Onyx app. You can just select trophy, or you can select high abundance, which is super slick, super convenient, saves a lot of time. It is just something that used to take, maybe an hour or two of searching through some of this. You can really do it in just a few seconds now, so that's really nice. And so once I kind of find either a trophy fishery or a high abundance fishery, whatever it is, then I'm going to look at maybe the half dozen that I have, or however many it is, and I'm gonna try to differentiate, try to pick the lake that is going to set up the best. And so for me, when I'm looking for lakes that are setting up good for fall crappies, I'm looking for kind of 2 or 3 things. One, I'm looking for something that has, say, large weed flats, something that would hold these fish in the summertime. Some very obvious ones, maybe not around the whole lake, but maybe a handful of areas that have some weedy flats adjacent to some deeper basins. And the second thing that I look for is something that has multiple basins that kind of top out into that 20 to 30 foot range, maybe even 20 to 40 foot range. I don't like the ones that get super deep into 60, 70 feet. I don't have as good of luck with those, but when it's in that like 20 to 30, even out to 20 to 40, if there's like 2, 3, 4 basins, primary basins, that is a very easy lake to kind of break down. And so you have these obvious weed flats, you have these very good fish holding basins for when it gets to more of a wintertime pattern. Then you can easily see that transition as to how they're going to move. And so once you find a lake that has some of those shallow weed flats, has 2, 3, 4 of those very good fish holding basins for, late fall into the winter, now I can really easily break down this lake depending on the water temps, depending on the time of year. So the earlier in the fall, I'm going to start with the weeds. So for example, I did it backwards. I thought these fish were going to be in the basin today, and they were not. So I started looking at some of these basins, not there. So I almost gave up on it, but then I went back to what I typically should have started with, and I started finding some of these shallow weed flats. You probably can't see it, but right off to my side here, there is actually reeds that you can see, and then it kind of slow tapers off, and then it gets to a little steeper break. So I know I can see the reeds, which is good spawning habitat. That slow taper shows me that there's likely some good cabbage along that. and then that kind of steeper break to the basin. And so like I said, early in the year, those fish are going to be on or mix into those weeds. As it progresses, they're going to slowly slide out into kind of this time frame right here. I'm sitting in about 20 feet off the edge of that break. So there's that cabbage that's up a little shallower, then it drops down to this first break line. Then my basin is off to the side. They're definitely not over basin yet. They are right now on that kind of initial break adjacent to those weed flats. And as much as I'd like to just keep going through information, I'm sitting with a bunch of fish down below me. I need to catch one more, and then we'll talk through the next thing, which is going to talk a little bit about electronics. Yeah, those fish are just, I honestly wonder if there's not something there. You can see that little thicker stuff that almost looks like maybe a tree or a brush pile, which is something I need to keep in mind for the winter. Let's see where these guys are at. Ooh, I'm sliding off a little bit. Like I said, this wind is just ripping today. Oh, that guy's coming up good. Come on. Come on there. Oh, he bit, but he didn't stick it. Drop back down. Yeah, I wonder if some of these ones that are a little closer to whatever this cover is, this tree or whatever it is, wonder if there's some of the little smaller ones. Oh, this one doesn't feel terrible. Honestly, I could probably just spot lock and fan cast, drop with a slip bobber. Still a decent fish, honestly. I thought, with how some of those kind of nipped at it, I thought this might be a smaller fish, but an okay average size. These aren't trophy lakes necessarily. This one's more high abundance. Just wanted to go catch some fish so I could show you guys. That'll kind of lead into the next tip, which is to utilize your electronics. And I know even saying that, there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna jump down my throat. Well, I can't afford that forward-facing sonar, that's cheating, whatever. You can easily do this, not as easily as forward-facing sonar, but you can definitely use your 2D, you can use your side imaging, and then ultimately using your forward-facing sonar if you'd like as well. I had done this a lot even before I had forward-facing sonar. You drive around, a lot of times it's these flats, and these schools of crappies would stick out like a sore thumb, especially if it's on softer bottom. You see some of those white returns. I'll show you some screenshots here. You can do the same thing with 2D. You drive over top of them and you just see these big schools. And so being able to utilizing your 2D, your side imaging here, these guys are staying put. You know, a lot of times in the fall they are moving. These guys, maybe it's because of that cover, whatever it is, these things are staying put. And so this would be very easy for me to find with my 2D, find with my side imaging, and just keep casting on them. But honestly, probably the biggest thing that you're gonna have to differentiate when you're doing this is differentiating between some of these schools of perch that are out there, because a lot of times you'll see these schools of perch or different types of bait, and differentiating between the crappies. And that sometimes just takes some time on casting on a couple of these groups, but usually those perch look like that big bait ball. But typically when you find these schools of crappies, they are a little more spaced out and a little thicker red as opposed to those really tight groups. So utilizing your electronics and being able to differentiate between perch and the crappies. And just to be fully transparent, it took me honestly 2 hours, even with forward-facing sonar. It probably took an hour to 2 hours to even find these fish. I thought I'm on a lake that has some pretty identifiable basins, and I thought I was easily gonna be able to come out here and just drive around with my side imaging, find them, and then fine tune it with the forward-facing sonar, and they were just not there. So then what I eventually did is I just started working along these shorelines that had some of those weedy flats, and I just worked, and I had to drive a lot of them before I actually found these fish. I was just about to head home actually and just call it a day, and then I stumbled on these right before I left. And so if they're not where you anticipate, that's where, like I said, you can utilize your electronics. Saw these fish on side imaging first, and then I whipped around with my forward-facing sonar, and I'm really kind of fine-tuning and picking some of these fish off. Yeah, they're just kind of hanging out. There must be some sort of structure. Maybe I'll even drop the camera down or something if I have time at the end to identify it. But these appear to be a touch bigger, a little bit away from the structure. But again, sometimes when they're farther away, there we go. Just keep kind of hanging tight on this one. This one feels a touch bigger. You know, sometimes when they use their body, they're nice, you know, thin, flat bodies. They can really do a decent fight. That's a solid fish. I'll actually show that one right there because, like I said, we're going to talk through some presentation stuff. That one is on that new tungsten crappie queen. And so, with that being said, we're going to talk through some baits. You know, one of the big things that I recommend in the fall often is to use bigger baits, use heavier baits. because for whatever reason in the fall, it seems like it can be super windy. And so that can help through. Today, it was ripping wind. It's starting to slow down now, but still getting some pretty good gusts. And honestly, if I would have went down to like a 16th or 32nd ounce jig, I don't know if I would have gotten to them. So I upsized to this 1/8 ounce tungsten jig. That's where that tungsten is so nice, because you can still have that smaller profile while still getting a heavier jig to cut through some of that wind. You know, if it's not windy, then you might have to work that bait too fast. So you do want to downsize to that 16th or 32nd, something like that. But I really like, in the fall especially, to use these new ones, our Crappie Queen. You've seen me use the Crappie King jigs as well. The Crappie Queen has that almost hair and the tinsel, which is nice. It's got that little bit of sparkle on it, some of that glittery type stuff, which I like because, for example, this is a more stained body of water, which can be some very good crappie lakes. And when you get that little bit more stained body of water, sometimes having that little more glimmer can be a little bit of an attractant to some of these fish. And also, you'll notice that as it gets darker and darker, that bite tends to get better and better. So having a glow combination mixed with a little bit of kind of that shine in there can be a good combination for getting these fish to bite. But the biggest thing I like is just having something where I don't have to use any live bait, and having that little bit of hair, that little bit of tinsel just really allows you to catch fish after fish after fish without having to rebait. You can put a plastic on it too. Those hand candy plastics are really nice, but what I have found with this one, with that Crappie King, you do not even need to put any plastics on it. I think, depending on when this video is released, I think these will officially be available. I think it was October 13th. So you should be able to get your hands on these. So go ahead, check the Norfin website. I'll put a link down below also if you want to take a look to see if you can get your hands on some of those, because these are going to be deadly in the fall. And honestly, I might even use these in the winter a little bit, but definitely fall, definitely spring, especially in this 1/8 ounce size when these fish are moving a little faster. You know, the other thing that I will do is I will use just a regular 1/8 ounce tungsten jig with one of those eye candy plastics on it. Sometimes that gives a little more bulk that I like. I will use a crappie minnow on that if those fish are getting a little more finicky. If I'm like trying to target some of the biggest fish, then I'll throw that crappie minnow on. And the other thing that I will use a lot in the fall, not as much in the spring, but definitely in the fall, is using smaller size kind of glide baits. You know, those get up and down so quick, so you can work them through some of these fish, especially once these fish move out to the basin more, they move very quickly. These are kind of hanging tight because they have some of those weeds, they have some of that tree or whatever's down there kind of holding them tight. But once they move out to the basin, all bets are off. Those fish are moving like crazy. And so being able to have something that's bigger and heavier can both help catch bigger fish, but just helps you get around those fish as they are moving. All right, so I'm gonna catch one or two more and give you the last couple tips here. You see this one to my right here, that's where that kind of tree or whatever it is, so many fish you can hardly tell. And then there's this group off to the side. They're kind of staying put too, but on the forward facing sonar, at least they look a little bigger. So I'm gonna cast on these, kind of work it over top, try to pull out the bigger, more aggressive fish. Come on, see them there a bit. Yeah, it is a ton of fun and a great thing to do. Just go get a fish fry in the fall, go get on some action. You know, if you want to bring some kids out, bring some people that aren't as experienced fishing, this is a great thing to do. But it can also get tough. You know, today these fish are pretty bitey, but they're not always bitey like that. Show that one off right there. Another quality fish. Like I said, they're not always super bitey like that. And so one thing I will say is to keep moving and find active fish. It can be hard when you find a school of fish not to just get stuck on them, but especially as they move out into the basin, there's usually multiple schools of fish. So if you're on one group of fish and you've caught a couple and they kind of quit biting, or they just didn't even bite in the first place, move on. Trust your electronics, trust yourself to be able to move quickly, especially if you're in a situation like I am, where I have my transducer on my trolling motor, I have my amped outdoors, lithium batteries, and I don't have to worry about losing juice. And I can put this thing on 10 and I can cruise and find fish very quickly, which is what I had to do today. So don't be afraid to keep moving, find active fish if they are not biting. One more fish and we'll bring you the last tip. And I'm actually gonna talk through this last tip as I'm fishing here. Because as you can see, these fish honestly have not moved, and it is a very easy bite. So that begs the question about conservation, because as you can see, I could sit here and I could catch fish after fish after fish. Luckily at this point of the year, they're only in 20 feet of water, so I don't have to worry about, you know, any barotrauma effects or anything like that. One more there, but like I said, begs the question about conservation. Anytime that you're out fishing, there's obviously a chance of killing fish, you know, even if you're catching and releasing. You know, the biggest thing is to, as it gets towards the fall, as fish sometimes move deeper, is to just fish manageable depths and be responsible for these fish. You know, if you're starting to see some effects of barotrauma or some fish not going down, either just catch and keep or be done. And honestly, I have no problem with you catching fish out of deep water as long as you're keeping fish. You know, it's not a bad thing to go catch, you know, a handful of fish out of 40, 50 feet of water, catch your meal, and then go home. But either way, I'll get off my soapbox. Hopefully you're able to use some of these tips this fall to get out and have just an awesome time, because bottom line is there's something about just setting the hook a bunch of times on some fish, getting a fish fry, that's just a ton of fun. As always, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.